Chips are back, course talking FF7. We're talking Rebirth. We're here with it's a video for Rebirth, maybe, in regards to Queen's Blood. Hamaguchi talking about the possibility of expanding it. In what way, I'm not sure. Hamaguchi did an interview with Red Bull relatively recently, and there's like maybe one other thing to talk about besides the Queen's Blood thing, and it's about the infamous yellow paint. So Red Bull just straight up asked him about this. They say, speaking of strong opinions, what's your response to the discussion around the use of yellow paint to show where players can climb? I didn't think the yellow paint would be something that would be discussed on social media. For things like camera options where people have a wide variety of preferences, there's no one right answer. Our basic approach is to offer various accessibility options. So I'd like to take on board the valuable feedback we have received towards this for future games. So we talked about the yellow paint a little bit when I did my review of the Nibelheim demo. And ultimately, I don't care. It's like whatever. Like if they're doing it for accessibility reasons, perfectly fine. It's like they're doing it for people that have a harder time seeing or a hard time playing games in general. If they want to give indications of where you can climb and things like that, perfectly fine. I will say, for me personally, it's a bit immersion breaking, and these aren't necessarily like immersive games, really. But whenever I see stuff like that in games, like the first thing I think of is like, who the fuck painted that? Like, who's going around the world of Gaia painting that shit yellow? I had the same like problem a bit with like Witcher 3 when I was playing that, because a lot of the ledges you can climb in Witcher 3 have like white paint on them or something. And it's the first thing I think of too when I see that. So it's just like, that's my personal opinion. It doesn't ruin the game for me. It's not the biggest deal ever. I don't need them to like put a setting in the fucking menus to turn off yellow paint. I don't give a shit. I'm just personally the kind of player that with games like this that are kind of big, I try to climb everything anyways. Like just going back to like Skyrim days, trying to hop up a mountain and stuff like that. Like this is how I am. I'm that kind of player. I'm always trying to climb and explore and everything like that. So I don't personally need it, because you could still just have like the yellow parts that you can climb on the walls. You can just get rid of the yellow paint. You can just see that you can climb those notches, right? Like you don't have to have the paint there. But again, if it's for accessibility reasons, perfectly fine. Leave it. If there are things that are worth getting upset about with games and stuff like that, and I'm not saying that with like Rebirth at all, because there's really nothing I can complain about too much, but yellow paint is just simply not the hill to die on, because who gives a fuck? Like it's just like people were getting like so upset back when the demo first dropped and there's a yellow paint controversy. Like, who cares, dude? Like it tells you how good the game is if that's what you got to focus on. If your focus on what's bad about Rebirth is yellow paint, it's got to be a damn good game. Tell us more about the Queen's Blood card game. How many cards are there, and are there plans for new cards to be added? There are 145 cards in total. We haven't decided anything in terms of future development for Queen's Blood, but so far, the media who played it have provided very positive feedback on it, so we want to consider further expansions as a possibility. It's obviously exciting for those of us that enjoy playing Queen's Blood. Like I said before, I don't know exactly what they mean by expansions. They ask if there'll be more cards added. I would assume that means to Rebirth. But his answer is that further expansions will be considered as a possibility. So I don't know if they want to add more to Rebirth, as in more Queen's Blood cards or games or matches or something, or like expand the card game going into the third game, because I'm assuming that's what they're going to have Queen's Blood there too, I'd assume. I don't know why they wouldn't. Maybe add more to it in terms of like the card pool and players and all that other shit. Or maybe expand it outside of Rebirth / the remake project, because I know some people want like an IRL Queen's Blood, which would be pretty cool to collect. But also maybe like a mobile game. I think this would be a good idea. It's what they did with Witcher 3. Speaking of Witcher 3 earlier, like Gwent was such a hit with players that there's a mobile Gwent game, right? I did try to play it like I think a year or so ago, but it was so drastically different from Gwent in Witcher 3 that I just I didn't want to even relearn it or whatever. But Gwent in Witcher 3 is like simple but good. But yeah, it was so popular they got its own mobile game, and I could see that happening with Queen's Blood potentially. One, you already have the massive card pool that's in Rebirth. 145 cards is a lot. I think in Witcher 3 with like Gwent, I think there's like 195 cards, but there's like 120 base cards, right? So there's only like 120 cards because the others are duplicates. So I think there's a bigger card pool of Queen's Blood than there is of Gwent, at least with Witcher 3. So that's pretty good. And then I don't think they've covered like every single character and everything from the remake project so far. Like you could pull from remake, of course, for more cards. And then you have obviously the third game coming up, but also you have FF7 itself and Crisis Core and all that other shit you can pull to make cards from. And then if you ever eventually run out of like FF7 shit to make cards for, you have the entire fucking franchise. There's no reason you couldn't do like Final Fantasy 8, 9, and 10 cards, right, for Queen's Blood. Queen's Blood doesn't have to be specifically FF7. There's like a decent opportunity here to move into a different market, right? Like I think a mobile game is probably the best option. I don't know about like IRL collecting would be cool if they actually like printed the cards, but I don't know how like big the Final Fantasy TCG itself is right now. I don't ever hear about it too much. I know there's like tournaments and shit. I know it is popular enough that they're still making cards, but like I don't know about like, coming out with another Final Fantasy card game like IRL, but like a mobile game, I think it'd be perfect. I'd also be very interested on how Queen's Blood would be as a PvP game when you're actually playing against another person who's like, it's not just like AI that's kind of bad. Where you can actually like the meta would be different, right? Because decks would be built differently because you're trying to counteract another player who's going to be intelligent and have like the good cards and all that other shit. Like I'd be very curious like what the best deck would be and like if there was actually PvP. So I'm kind of curious how Queen's Blood would play with PvP in terms of like going first and going second, just using something like Yu-Gi-Oh as an example, card game I play. Like, you most of the time want to go first in that card game just because you can set your back row, set your traps, and you can react to your opponent, all that other shit. But you can't attack first turn in Yu-Gi-Oh! So there are decks that are better and more optimized for going second, because if you can clear your opponent's board, you can attack them directly. So I'm kind of curious how decks will be built for PvP in terms of like going first and going second. If you have the opportunity to like decide who goes first and second, and the ability to pass turns, right? If you flip a coin, I go first, I see my opening hand, and I can decide, do I want to pass to my opponent, let them go first, and I can, this hand's better to react to them. Like, I think it'd be like a cool dynamic with Queen's Blood in PvP. It's also a possibility too, talking about the mobile game in PvP, like if there's a way they could add that to Rebirth, that'd be kind of interesting. To some sort of like online feature, which we talked about before leading up to, you know, Remake Part 2, as we were calling it back then in Rebirth. Like, with the Gold Saucer mini games, like having like a leaderboards or actual PvP with like maybe the 3D brawler sort of game, like any kind of games that would allow for actually playing other players, I think it'd be pretty fucking cool, man. Also, some people mentioned the possibility of them adding like Queen's Blood to Final Fantasy 14. That's obviously a great way to do it too. There's a huge player base there. A lot of people play 14, and adding, I know they already have like Triple Triad or whatever, but you could add another card game. It'd be kind of cool, man. It's a good idea. Since we're talking about Queen's Blood, might as well mention this. With yesterday's video, like, my only complaint with Queen's Blood was that you're forced to go first. Like, that's something I wasn't a fan of. And a lot of people pointed out that you can just skip your first turn, which I just never even at all considered. So that's really the... I still think it's kind of dumb that you're forced to go first, even if you have the possibility of skipping your turn. I still think it'd be better to have, like, a coin flip that, like, it decides if you're going first or your opponent's going first. But that kind of gets rid of my only complaint, which was being forced to go first all the time. Actually, I do want to add, too, really quickly, another complaint I have with Queen's Blood's storyline. I won't spoil anything on whatever, you know, but it's just like the last person you get to face in the storyline, there is an enormous fucking jump in difficulty whenever you beat the second to last person, then you got to go fight the last person, right? Like, the leap, because the deck I showed in yesterday's video, like, I beat the second to last person just fine with that deck, like, first or second try. You cannot possibly beat the last person with the deck I had. It's just not even possible. You have to build a deck specifically to beat them. And I feel like they could have done that better throughout the quest line, making you face people that are progressively harder, and you got to like alter and change your decks. Because I've used the same deck, like I said, almost the entire time. And then you get to that final boss, and it's insanely hard. Like, I don't even have... I've looked up like tutorials and guides on how to beat this person. And I don't even have... I think I have like half the cards maybe. But I have to go out there and like grind now and finish like the rest of like the side questing and mini games and shit to unlock more cards to be able to beat this person. It's just kind of like the leap in difficulty from the second to last is insane, and I feel like they could have handled that a little bit better. This is pretty much the video I did. It's probably a little longer than it needed to be, but I am passionate about card games and RPGs, man. Like I've said before, it's something I grew up doing. I've done pretty much my entire life. If you get me into an RPG where I can run around the world collecting cards like I do IRL, playing against people like I do IRL, like I'm going to love that shit. I have a lot of opinions on it too. But I'm excited for them to potentially expand this. Again, I don't know how. Do you expand it Rebirth? Do you expand it third game? Do you expand it into IRL shit? Mobile games, whatever. I'm fine. Do all of it. Anyways, this video. Subscribe to my guys' new social in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, #YT. That's it. Why is it going fuzzy? Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more. And nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine or leave it like Cobain.